Hey friend, welcome back to another episode of Mastering Post-Production Sound. My name is Joel D. Catalan. I am an Emmy-nominated sound re-recording mixer and supervising sound editor. For the past year, I've been sharing videos here on YouTube with the sole purpose and mission to empower you to navigate, believe, and thrive in the post-production sound industry. Today, I have the distinct honor and privilege to have on the channel a colleague, friend, and mentor, re-recording mixer, Larry Benjamin, CAS. From shows like Ozark, Better Call Saul, Poker Face, Larry has been an integral part of the post-production sound industry. So I'm honored to have Larry today. Let's not waste any time and let's dive into today's episode. Larry Benjamin, CAS, my friend, my colleague, my mentor, everything. You are amazing. Thank you, Larry, for taking time to join us here on the Mastering Post-Production Sound YouTube channel. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel, for having me. That's quite an introduction. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, I think about journeys, right? I think about journeys of those of us who are doing what we love, because I'm just gonna put it out there. I think you're doing what you love. And I think you have a good time. And I know this because I've seen you firsthand, and I know the work that you are putting out into the world. And it's people that love what they do. It's an extension of their creativity, I believe. And so I just want to applaud you for what you have brought not only to our industry, but to our community, because I know that you have been not only a mentor to me and so many other people. You've been a sounding board. You've been a person who's heard my concerns over the years in the industry. So I just want to say thank you publicly. But I'm grateful to have you here. So Larry, tell us a little bit about your journey to sound. Obviously, you are a re-recording mixer. You're mixing sound at the highest level in this industry. Let us know how long you've been doing it. Where did you start? Why sound? Was it always sound? Take us on a little story time here. Journey.
Sure. I came from a small town north of Boston in Peabody, Massachusetts, and I always had a penchant for sound. I played music by ear. Like yourself, you're a musician as well, and I played keyboards and was in different bands and things like that. But when I was young, I was fascinated by just bouncing sound back and forth between just two tape recorders and building sounds and recording things and putting them in my goofy little Super 8mm films, kind of my own little soundtracks and editing. So, and that kind of grew, and I really thought I was heading towards a video direction, like video. I would shoot a lot of videos and edit. And then I did like an internship at our local cable company, and I got bit a little bit more by the sound bug. But when I went to Emerson College, I thought that that's what I was going to do, is video production. But I also did some radio, and I also cut up back in the days of tape audio, and worked doing little skits for like a little comedy troupe that was in school, and doing these little kind of audio bits. And I liked it. I liked doing like the theater of the mind, where it wasn't reliant on the visuals necessarily, just kind of building sound. But I didn't really take that direction in school so much. It was like I said, my bend was on film and television production. So it wasn't until I moved from Massachusetts to Los Angeles that I said, you know what, this is something that's an actual job. And we can talk about, my first actual job. I was a runner, delivering tapes.
Delivering tapes, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and I delivered tapes to a post facility, and I got to sit in on a sweetening session and watch what was involved in mixing. And I didn't even know that.
You remember
that was
what
a job.
It was, Larry? You remember what
it
was?
I do, yeah, because I was a runner for Dick Clark, and I was delivering tapes to a facility, and they were doing the MTV Music Awards.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Yeah, and we were sweetening, adding fake applause and laughs and things like that. I'm like, I couldn't believe it that this is something. And then even cutting sound effects to enhance what was going on in the show, which seemed to be live to tape, but in fact it wasn't necessarily live to tape. So I was kind of fascinated by that. And after that runner job ended, I got a position at the Video Post House working in the tape vault or tape library. That was kind of like an entry level position.
Yes.
And then, kind of hung out on my own and watched that mixer who, rest his soul, he's passed, but watch him mix those kinds of things. Those were kind of one-person mixing gigs, if you will, doing promos and trailers and commercials and variety shows, which at the time was still something. And I said, I think that's what I want to do. So I
Gotcha.
shifted gears. But yeah, I've always had an interest in sound going back from being a child, and just kind of had
Hmm.
continued to follow it through. So
Oh, I
it's a journey
love it.
that's continuing.
Yes, yes, and I do remember just you telling me about your musical history as well, and the radio. I do remember that because a lot of people don't know Larry's got quite a voice, and he can put on some good sound. Put him in front of a microphone. Hire him. He's hired.
Thank you so
Is that
much. 88.9 WERS.
you see?
I'm just kidding.
I love it. I love it. I always remember that. Well, Larry, I want you to talk a little bit about like mentorship and how it played a role in your life. And for those, who are tuning in maybe for the first time, I when I our paths are very similar in that sense, like you kind of mentioned. Music was big to us. I got my first job in a vault as well, delivering tape, picking things, stuff like that. So talk about a little bit about some of the people along your journey, especially early on. You kind of alluded a little bit to it, but were there people that you can ask questions? Were there people that kind of said, hey, hey kid, I want you to do this, do it like that? Talk a little bit about what kind of that role played in your life.
Absolutely. The people that I was involved with early on, Bob Banahan was a sweetening mixer that worked at this video post house. Gary Coppola,
Oh
those two were
yeah.
friends,
Oh, rest his soul.
and
Yeah.
yeah, rest his soul. And Gary also had a musical background, and he gave me
Yeah.
advice on
Hmm.
not only mixing music but how to blend things to create a soundtrack. Jamie Ledner, he was another sweetening mixer that worked at Post Logic. So those are some early mentors in the three mixer kind of configuration at the
Hmm.
time. Now it's two, but at the time when I
Hmm.
first started, it was three
That's
mixers.
right. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, it was a dialogue mixer, a dedicated music mixer, and then your effects mixer. Correct.
Correct. And because music wasn't always happening, they would divvy up the Foley. So it was music and Foley, and
Yes.
I did that job. There was a mixer named Tim Philbin who mixed dialogue, and I watched Tim and watched the approach that he took to things, and kind of,
Yeah.
we always kind of take our early mentors, and now we use Pro Tools templates, but at the time it's like their chain. What did they use and why?
What did they? Yes.
You know what I mean? So I kind of watched and analyzed. You pick the little bits and pieces from each
Hmm.
person. There wasn't like a mentorship program or anything like that. It was just kind of learn on the job, and
Yeah.
kind of thrown into the deep end, but a lot of observation, and I put a lot of time in doing a lot of freebies, a lot of AFI
Okay.
projects, a lot of student films, a lot of people that off of Craigslist even, that had
Yeah.
an indie
Yeah.
film
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah.
and my early mixes were terrible, but
Oh, I
I
love it.
learned a lot, about what to do, what not to do, because
Yeah.
you're kind of learning just as the people that you're doing the favor for, they're learning. So
Yeah.
those were my
100%.
early things. But mentorship is critical, to have someone that can guide you, at least someone that's there that you can ask
Hmm.
questions to, because early on, there's really no education, a formal education. It's not like going to Full
Hmm.
Sail or some recording school. It's just I did a lot of on the job training.
I love it. I love it. Well, I always tell people that sound kind of fell in my lap because I didn't go to school for it either, as a musician, but very similar path in the sense that, you just kind of, I'll never forget Becky Sullivan. She was the first one to ever give me kind of like, hey, Joel, this is what you need to do. The circle's really small. A lot of people trying to
Hmm.
get in, but once you get your foot in the door, you're in. Go get a job at a small mom and pop house. And remember, the minute you walk through those doors, you're getting paid to learn. And that was the approach. Oh, learn all the aspects, meet the people,
Yeah.
start kind of picking their brains. And very similar, I can relate to your story, that idea of sitting there and observing. Now, I just want to share, to the audience, like Larry was that for me. So I grew up as one of my first sound tech recordist gigs, mix tech gigs, was to support mixers like Larry, and I learned on the job supporting, getting their templates, importing the things, making mistakes, and trying to learn from them. And Larry was always one of those people, one of those mixers who those are the type of people you want to be around. The people who are open and say, yeah, sit down, take a listen, watch, ask a question here and there, so so much of our journey is very similar in that sense that, it makes me tell other people like, hey, like if I can do it, you can do it too. You got to work
Yeah.
hard. You got to have people who are willing, like Larry, to
Hmm.
give of their time and say, yeah, sure, go ahead and sit down. So
I was glad
I'll
to be part of your
forever have
journey.
that. Yeah,
No,
thank
thank you.
you.
And you were very sharp and astute, and you picked up things very quickly, and you got it. And I think coming from a musical background really serves us well, right? I don't know. I believe you play by
That's
ear,
yeah.
and it's critical in learning, even just intuitively. There's a muddy mix. It's a wall
Yeah.
of sound. How do we clear things up? And just
Mm,
like you would know,
yeah.
the guitar solo, it's too big, it's too loud, or
Uh-huh.
the
Uh-huh.
drums are overpowering. Even though in a
Yeah.
musical sense, uh, the same kind of thing applies, in a soundtrack. Like, what are
100%.
clouding these frequencies? Let's not necessarily
Yeah.
keep raising things. Let's
Let's
maybe
subtract
carve out,
maybe. Yeah, carve
subtract.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had some of those kind of intuitive skills, and I could see
Yeah.
you were also very organized and sharp and fast. And I knew that you were going to ascend.
Well, bless
Obviously.
you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, the music journey for me, being a woodwind player was I transferred a lot of my knowledge that I learned from, playing in big bands and top 40, groups and stuff like that to the sound, world.
Yeah.
And really, like you said, it really was, the ear training, and I know like for you, you can kind of play anything, on the piano, you hear it a couple times, you got it. But
Right.
like being able to transfer that information, or rather transpose it to a different industry. And I think the industry, I don't know if you find it this is the case too, but when I first got in, I was like, wow, there's a lot of like musicians here, or like former musicians, who are doing this. I mean, you obviously you find that some of your musical, training background, helped you a lot, right?
Very much so. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Even notching out hums and tones and things like
Yeah.
that I
Frequencies,
hear,
tones. Yeah.
you kind of go right to them and okay, well, how do I get this dialogue to not be so nasal? You kind of know what, what to
Yeah.
invert or what to
Yeah.
boost. So yeah, a lot of those
I love it.
sensibilities from music apply to very much
Yeah.
what we're doing. And some of the same tools, by the way, as you know,
Yeah.
apply. So I
Absolutely.
found it very parallel.
Yeah, no, and that's really great. Talk to me a little bit about like as you kind of journeyed, right? And you're finding yourself kind of making your way throughout, the post sound industry. Did you ever have a time where you were like, "Oh, I'm in over my head. Like I don't know if I can do this." Like talk about
Yeah.
how you maybe experience fear, imposter syndrome, that they're gonna find out I'm faking it. Did you ever experience that? And if so, how did you kind of navigate those feelings?
Sure. Early on in my career, I was tasked with a project that was a Whitney Houston special that,
Ooh,
required me to mix the actual music. I got a 32 track, 1 inch digital tape that
tape.
had
Yeah.
all the individual tracks. And it's like, well, I knew the concept of, well, kick, snare, overheads,
Uh-huh.
guitar, but this is like the stakes seem much higher because this was Whitney Houston. And her producer came in and was helpful in crafting the sound of the show, but not necessarily this part. This was kind of left to
Hmm.
me. I had to A B between the mix that was a composite mix used in the video edit. I had to kind of
Hmm.
recreate that. So I'm just kind of A Bing using my ear. And it was a big challenge technologically because
Yeah.
we had to rent this 1 inch 32 track digital tape machine. And this
Yeah.
was a concert that was shot in Spain and it wasn't locked to anything.
Oh my
So it was just
gosh.
kind of free rolling. There was
Free
no,
roll. Yeah.
yeah. So
Gosh.
I used what was called the GPI, a general purpose interface. And we were recording this to a 1/2 inch 4 track. And
Okay.
uh,
Wow.
we took the 4 track and I was VSOing at variable speed,
No way.
trying to get it to phase to this 30
Yeah.
2 track digital that was just rolling and running freely. So
Wow.
I was like, how am I going to do this? I didn't know how I was going to
Yeah.
problem solve it, but I did. I eventually
Mhm.
got through it. And I felt like, well, I fooled them this time, but maybe they'll find me out that I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But the producers liked it. The sound was good. And again, I was
Yeah.
using the guide track that the video editor had
Mm.
created. And I was kind of
Hmm.
A-Bing and trying to find out, okay, maybe it's a little more reverb, a little more EQ
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I was just twisting knobs and making things sound
I
as
love
similar as
it.
I could. But I was worried on that early job. I had no business, doing that level of that high profile of a show at such an early time in my
Yeah.
career.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think we've all had those moments. And I remember like when I was a tech being like, oh my God, I messed it up so much. I could go out that door and never come back, and maybe they'll just like, okay, he's done and that's the end of my career. But there's something about being thrown in there, right? Being thrown in there to kind of like, okay, like you relied on your ears, you were A
Yeah,
B in it, and I think that's a real
exactly.
important thing to have as a mixer. Almost like one of the most important things because we all grab the knobs. We all like, what does this do? Oh, okay, oh, a little more of that, a little bit. I mean, that's
Right,
the way I
right.
learned. Okay, that sounds good. But the fact remains that you persisted, right? I think that's the
Yeah,
difference between those of us who, like, we all experience fear, there's a difference though, right? There's a difference between those who want the fear to go away. They just kind of turn the other way and run away from that thing that's they're afraid of.
Yeah, you
Or
got to
there's those
push
who just,
through.
yeah, exactly. You
Yeah.
acknowledge and you proceed like you have. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and believe me, it was harrowing, and I had that kind of flop sweat, that feeling of you're getting hot behind
Oh
the
yeah.
collar. It's like, oh
Oh
boy.
yeah.
But yeah, and you just like, you don't want to turn around and have too much eye contact because like they'll find me out.
They're gonna find
But
out.
but it did sound good in the end, or
Good.
good at the
Yeah.
time. If
Yeah.
I listen to it back now, I'm sure I'd be
Yeah.
horrified. But it passed muster with the folks at the time.
Good.
But
Yeah.
getting there was a lot of
Sure.
sausage making that they wanted
Yeah.
as I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
faking a
Pay no
little bit.
mind. Pay no
Yeah,
mind. Right.
exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that makes me think about kind of now where you're at in your career journey, right? You have, been part of some really amazing projects. I mean, from most recently, you run with Ozark and Better Call Saul, really getting the acknowledgement of not only your peers, but the industry and as a whole. I mean, gosh, what? 11 Emmy nominations, yeah,
That's
12
correct. Yeah.
CAS nominations and a win, yes.
Yes, yes, I did want to say CAS Award, but no Emmys yet. But
Okay, hey,
thank you.
hey, yet.
Listen, I've been in great
Keyword,
company.
yet.
That's right. We're going
Yes.
to keep plugging through.
I love it. Well, with
Thank
all
you.
that, with all what you've done, of recent, how do you navigate when you sit down, right? And you're working on something that you maybe are new to the project. What is your approach when you're sitting down for the first time with, let's say, a new project, right? Because these shows you kind of got to establish the sonic world and create the signature sounds for these, really potent characters. I know so many people enjoyed those series. What's your approach creatively when you're sitting down to mix?
Well, it's first of all establishing with the filmmakers
Mm,
what they're trying to communicate with sound. So this is a good example. So we did Better Call Saul and El Camino, which is the Breaking
that's right.
Bad movie, with Vince Gilligan. Vince Gilligan is currently shooting a show that we'll be mixing early next year,
Oh,
mid
great.
next year. Even though we've worked with him before and we have a shorthand and there's
Hmm.
pleasantries and all that, this is a whole other show. I've seen the first episode. It's a whole other world that we're going to have to create.
Got it.
And you have to kind of leave your expectations at the door or your suppositions at the door.
Hmm.
It's what are you trying to tell story wise with sound, or what's its role? Do we want it to be large and bombastic? Do we want it to be subtle and tasty, or a little combination in between? Do you want, what are the dynamics you're looking for? So we can craft the sound of the show, if you will, around what the filmmakers are trying to achieve. So that's our goal, is to find out, kind of establish through good communication what they're looking for, and that'll help determine our taste. Obviously, we have our own creative input, we have our own
Of course.
sensibilities and our own tastes, but it has to kind of work with what the filmmakers want in terms of what they're
Right.
trying to communicate story-wise. What is sound's role in their particular show. And once we establish that, we can run with it, and we don't have to be afraid to experiment. Even if it's a new showrunner or new producer that we haven't worked with before, we want to be able to trust our gut and not feel constrained to experiment.
Yeah.
Let's explore, let's try new things. And even if you make a full circle and you start with this and you end up right back where you started after
Yeah.
they strip away or maybe add things,
Sure.
that's okay. It's fun to go on that journey, that little exploration.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
it's like what I like to call the art of creative collaboration. So everybody
yes,
has, a voice in this, and we're trying to get, like you said, you're trying to sonically tell the story of the filmmaker. Obviously you sit there with years of experience, and not only technically but creatively, and you're sitting there
right.
trying to tell the story sonically. So I love that. That's a great insight for those who are not only starting their journey, but also even those of us who, like for me, that's something that I love hearing things like that. Talk about a little bit about like relationships. Like I constantly tell people who are either aspiring or new to the industry that relationships are everything in this business. Talk to me how they
Absolutely.
played a role in your career.
The most important thing, I would say.
Mm,
Certainly the technical proficiency and competence, I think at our levels, we have to have a certain amount of it, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be
100%.
doing these shows.
Sure.
And a lot of that stuff can be taught. Maybe natural air ability or whatever
Sure.
from musicianship, it helps.
Sure. Hmm.
But the technical part of it can be taught. So I don't focus on like, what's that plugin? What's your chain? What's that? Those are
Right.
fun things, believe me.
Sure.
The nerdy, geeky sound part of
Yeah.
me
Sure.
loves that. But it's more about the relationship.
Mm,
And I have cultivated and nurtured these relationships so that we have repeat clients, and that's the
Ah,
goal. So
right
I would
there.
say what we are is in the client acquisition and retention business,
Tension. Yes,
right? So we
yes,
want to
that's good.
retain these clients. So, it's listening to them, it's knowing how
Mhm.
to read a room, it's knowing how to make them feel comfortable, and also have them be heard. And communication is one of the key things that you want to
Mm,
focus on in maintaining that relationship,
mhm.
because they have choice. They can go with anyone. They
100%.
want to, most importantly, have fun.
Yeah.
In addition to telling their story, they want to have a good
Mhm.
time because we're spending many
Mhm.
hours and many days together.
Right.
But it's communication. So can you quickly get to the results? And it's not that it's a race to the finish, but obviously we have a compressed time schedule, generally speaking,
Right.
a little bit
Right.
different than feature films, which even has its challenges.
Yeah.
So we want to quickly be able to assess and communicate with them, what are you trying to achieve? And
Yeah.
sometimes they'll use non-technical or non-specific sound specific terms.
I want it to sound blue.
Right, exactly. So our job is to interpret that. Okay, so you want cool. Maybe that
Yeah, there
means
you go.
we're
Nice.
going like
Right.
visually you would have like bluer tones. What
Right.
does that mean sonically? What can we do? And so we want to try to be able to communicate with them quickly and effectively,
That's good.
and
Yeah.
be good listeners
Right.
and good stewards of their projects. So, but the relationship is
Mm.
the most important thing. And
Ah,
if you have a good relationship with them, and that involves, checking in with them, and not just, hey, can you give me work? It's how can I help you? Can I solve a problem? You're on a show, even if I'm not mixing it, feel free to send me dailies and I might be able to help you. Maybe this is something that can be salvaged or whatever, be of
yeah.
service. And we
Yes.
continue those relationships with lunches and dinners and
So
kind of
good.
a social aspect of it. So, but yes,
Yeah. Oh,
relationship is key.
Larry, that's like everything, that I not only believe, but I love just hearing, in a sense, one of my mentors say the same exact thing. It's like that is it right there. It's the service. It's how can I be of service to you? Because like much like you said, it's like we're in that service-based business, like you said, the, acquisition and retention of clients and
Yeah.
really creating an experience for them. When your clients walk away knowing number one, wow, their show sounds awesome, right? But on top of that, like, oh, wait, we also had a wonderful time. These are lovely people.
Right.
And man, it's not always about the project. It's about life. It's about, hey,
Yeah.
how are things going? Let's go grab a dinner. Let's go grab a lunch.
Exactly.
Those are some of the best, times in relationships, because we spend a lot of time together, right? We
Absolutely.
spend a lot of time together.
We do, and that's why having a broad knowledge base that isn't just sound specific. Believe me,
Yes.
I try to always keep up on the technology and what's
Sure.
happening with sound, obviously. But you want to
Hmm.
have a broad knowledge base because even just the things like small talk
Yeah.
are critical. I'll give you an example. We were doing an episode of Ozark, and we had a technical problem. We were on a stage that wasn't playing back
Okay.
Kevin's automation properly. So
Okay.
he had mixed a certain background element, and it was all
Hmm.
supposed to be behind the wall, kind of muffled.
Right.
And we had done a second day on a different stage,
Oh,
and then the
okay.
plugin didn't play back that EQ behind the
Properly.
wall. Right. So Kevin had to
Got it.
remix all of that
Wow.
material on that track. And so I was there small talking with Jason Bateman, and I knew that he liked baseball, and I knew about a
Oh, good.
thimble's worth of knowledge about baseball. So I went and in advance, had watched the Ken Burns baseball documentary.
Oh, yes.
And then he and I were
Nice
just sitting there
move, Larry.
BSing. Thank you. I'm looking over like, Kevin, how you doing with that? Okay, good.
Yes. Kevin is
And
his effects mixer for those
yes,
who know. Yeah.
for
At the
that show.
time.
Yeah.
At
So
the time.
so Jason was being entertained with my BSing on baseball, and Kevin was
Wow.
remixing that scene. So,
Wow.
but just again
I
having a
love it.
wide knowledge base, even if it's something that's not your
Yeah.
your ballywick, if you will.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And that kind of leads me to like, talking about the soft skills versus the hard skills. And we alluded a little bit about, to it. But yes, we all need to know, how a baseline of how to mix, right? And mixing is a very subjective art, but you have to know, okay, this does this. If I want to try to do that, I'm going to use this tool. But talk a little bit about like, I kind of call it like the 80-20 rule, like 20%, yes, taking care of the technical, the 80% being, behind the credenza, my filmmaker, something like that. Talk about how the soft skills, and you alluded to it a little bit, but how the soft skills have played a major role in your career.
Absolutely, it's again, it's connected in part to the relational aspect
Relationship.
of it,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's being a good listener, being a good communicator, and having passion and interest in their project. They don't want
Mm-hmm.
someone phoning it in. They want someone that's as invested as they are. So you have a conversation that is separate from the technical part of it, like story-wise. Tell me about what this character is. What are we trying to tell here? What timeline does this take place in? Where is this happening? You know, what are you trying to communicate here? I'll read the script sometimes in advance just to get an idea of the broader sense of a project, time permitting, of course. Sure. But it's also taking an interest in their lives, because they're not just, you know, what's the word? One-dimensional people. They have children and they have hobbies and they have interests. And so taking an interest in that and communicating about that, because a lot of people don't just want to just focus on the work. That's very important. But there's all this other time that surrounds that. And so you want to be very congenial and friendly and fun. And so those soft skills will tell you when to read the room, or how to read the room, when to make a joke, or when to be a little bit light, or if you can tell they're a little bit stressed out and they want you to just focus on the work, then maybe that's where we go. So it's really being a great listener. Certainly communicating is important, and being an effective communicator, so that there's not a lot of noise with that signal in communication. But it's also reading the room and seeing that, you know what, I would always let them kind of establish the tone. So if they're in a good mood and they want to be jovial and joke around, I will piggyback on that. But even things like language, I'm not going to use curse words or things like that haphazardly. I will let them feel comfortable let them kind of set that tone. And then even then, you know, I'm not necessarily going to do that, but at least they should be the ones that kind of, you know, break that barrier. I think.
Well, that's not your character either. And I know you for a long time. That's not necessarily the way you're thinking. But to that point, like I've worked with people on sound crews. We're like, oh, that's a little aggressive in front of clients that are new, and like, oh, we don't know. Like, do they want to joke like that? Do they not want to joke like that? Like, or is that their language? So like reading the room, there's
it's reading the absolutely. And when you have a long-term relationship with a client, then it's already been pre-established. So if you do have a jovial and you can joke and, you know, show funny videos and play with that, that's been established previously, right? So it's all about the rapport, and that is very important, is quickly developing and building on that rapport. And it's always looking for kind of commonalities. You know, we did a show called Presumed Innocent, and we had a producing director, Greg Gutanis, and he came from the Boston area, and then I happened to wear a T-shirt in that was very vintage, that was of a place from Boston. He recognized that, he knew the company. It just creates a little bit of small talk, a little bit 100%. Of a connection, right? So that's all part of the soft skills, which are not connected to the technology even the craft of mixing at all.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a big sports guy, and so like, you know, every once in a while I'll get a client who like loves baseball or something. We start talking, or Dodgers, it was my thing, and like. I remember we were working with the producer, and it was on a Kurt Sutter show or something. And he was a big Giants fan, right? And it's like, oh, Giants fan, Dodger fan. And so we had that in common, but we talked, you know, I found a way to like kind of talk about it in general, even though Dodger fans and Giants fans don't like each other. But it was really good. We had something that we can connect with, you know.
There was a fun banter that you could have.
Exactly. Oh, well, thank you for sharing a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit, if you could kind of take a little bit of a trip to memory lane as far as projects go. What are some of those projects that were special, that come to mind, that like, oh, that was really something that was bigger than me, or that you really had a good time? I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit.
No, that's fine. No, I mean, I get something from all the projects that I do. You named some of my favorites. I really love doing Ozark because it was, the characters were wonderful, and it was an opportunity to work with Jason himself. He came in, and he was such a big picture guy and very astute. I loved that. That process was very enjoyable. Chris Mundy, the showrunner, such a sharp, smart writer, and we had guest directors that would come in like Laura Linney. So that was great. Better Call Saul was fantastic because those filmmakers, the devil was the details. It was really the minutia, and it was fun sneaking in little bits and pieces of audio, and it was authentic and organic, and that process, while at times it could be like, okay, we're going to get through this, I loved every minute of the actual the creation of that with the filmmakers. And it was really a fun project where we had a lot of people come in for playback, and it was very collaborative. So those two were fun. El Camino, also with Vince, that was a great project. That was a theatrical release, very short-lived, and then it was lived in evergreen on Netflix. One other project was very weird show, but fun sonically, Legion.
Oh yeah,
And
Dan Stevens was in that.
yeah,
Was he?
Dan Stevens was the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
star.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was great because you could flex every sonic muscle that you could think of, doing things that you would never normally do. You were just bending and morphing and,
Oh
manipulating the audio in a real fun
yeah.
way. And I remember Noah Hawley, the showrunner, coming in,
Oh,
and I
that's
was a
great.
little trepidatious, like, okay, maybe I took it too far. He's like, yeah, that thing you're doing with the voice and you kind of modulating it and
Yeah.
ring modulating it and doing this and do more of that or take it further or
Oh
bend it more and
yeah.
would encourage us to just go crazy with it, and that was a fun
Oh
show sonically and creatively.
yeah. Oh, that's a blast. Well, talk a little bit about when you work with a filmmaker that maybe doesn't like what you're doing. Like it maybe pushes up against that. We've all kind of had a client like that. What are some of your best practices? Like, what has helped you kind of expand, maybe, be a little bit more open creatively, understanding that, hey, it is a collaborative process. And I mean, hey, I think my mixes sound great too. But when somebody says, hey, Joel, I don't know, I'm like, oh, really? What's that process like for you?
It's really not taking any of this stuff personally.
Ah,
It's
good.
it's
Mm,
it's not that I don't have a horse in the race. It's
right.
their horse, right? So and it's their race. So my job is to help facilitate their vision. So if I've worked extremely hard on going back and forth between 75 lines of ADR and a little bit of production, I've worked hard on. I can't. That's not a hill I'm not willing to die
Yeah.
on because just because I put effort into it. If they say, you know what, that's great, I really appreciate it, but let's go back to production for all of it. I love the performance; it's so much
Yeah.
better. I'd rather hear a little bit more noise here and there, even though
Yeah.
now
Don't
we
mind
have
it.
such incredible tools these days. I'll just dump it immediately and not take that
Nice.
personally. And it's the same thing about a creative vision. If
Mm-hmm.
we're doing a show that is out there and calls for flashbacks or dream sequences or just kind of treatments that they're not there to work with us as we're doing them. And when we present them, they're like, you know what? I appreciate all the effort. That's not what we're looking for. We want to go a different direction. I immediately just pivot and shift gears and like, okay, what's the direction you were thinking of? What did you have in
Mm-hmm.
mind? And then
Mm-hmm.
we'll kind of
Mm-hmm.
spitball and real time experiment with them at that point.
I love it.
You can't get caught up in the, well, we did this and we did this. Like get
Yeah.
over that quickly and immediately
Yeah.
and really
Mm-hmm.
focus on what they want. So
Mm.
the thing for me is just don't take it personally.
That's good. Yeah, I like to say check the ego at the door.
Yeah.
Just check it there and dive in. Oh, that is so good. So I'm thinking about, all these projects that you have been a part of, right? There's this, immense creativity that you're kind of demonstrating and exuding. You're getting your creative self out there. Talk a little bit about how you kind of balance everything else. Because let's just call it what it is. When we're in the thick of it, we are yeah, we're busy, right? When we're on
Yeah.
shows and we're back to back, we're burning it on both ends. What are some of the things you like to do to kind of just take care of yourself, recharge per
That's a
se?
great question. Yeah, you're right. There are times where if we don't do multiple shows where we end up working 6, 7 days a week at times, then it's a part-time job. So we kind of have
Yeah.
to do that. But you need to have that balance and try to not get so ear fatigue. So I would always say like, it's fine if you want to work all these days in a row, but let's make it reasonable hours because then you get
Mm-hmm.
to a point of diminishing return and maybe not make
Exactly.
the best decisions. But there are other avenues that I have that are creative. Like I like to paint pictures of dogs,
Ah,
even go for a walk, do journaling.
oh, so good. Yeah,
It's meditative. Those kinds of things.
very.
You need to take a break from that. And sometimes it's just being in the quiet. Like yes, I'll
Mm-hmm.
listen to a
Yeah.
podcast, I'll listen to music, but sometimes I just take a break. If I go on a walk, no headphones, I'm just literally listening to the
Mm-hmm.
sounds. So it's nice to
That's
have
good.
that contrast of
That's good.
the bombast of the mixes.
Yes,
You need to have that kind of sonic break and
I
not the
like that.
chaos of so much media. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I tend to tell folks that something I believe in is taking care of all the selves, taking care of the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical self. And when I'm doing that, I can show up as my best creative self
Yeah.
on the stage because I'm not exhausted or, going, physically not feeling good because I'm staying up late like crazy. So,
Hmm.
you talked a little bit, you said something that kind of made me think. You said you like to go on a walk without headphones. How much, I don't know if you're like me, but I'll find myself like in the real world, like studying the real world sometimes. Like, oh, did you hear that slap on that
Yeah,
side? Do you
I
ever
do that. I
catch
do
yourself?
that. Yes, I do that all the time. Matter of fact, if I'm in a situation where I am at a restaurant and I
Yeah.
love the futz on the music or whatever, I'll literally take out my phone, and I have a recording app, and record that because I want to emulate that. I like that blend. I like that what they're doing sonically. So yeah, I do. I'm always listening. I listen to a slap on, even like if I'm walking through like a canyon or whatever, and you hear like a horn honk. How does that bounce off? It's very dweeby, but I love that.
It.
Yeah, it's just always listening, and that's the thing. If you're always in a place of constant stimulation, you're not going to be open to hearing those kinds of treatments.
Oh, that's good. So you've mixed a lot of stuff, right, over your years. How do you get better?
You're always improving. You're always iterating. It's being open to the tools that are ever evolving and the technologies that are ever changing, right? So if there are new plugins that come out, read the reviews, is this something I need in my arsenal? Is it worthy of exploration? I'm watching YouTube videos. I'm learning from, just as people may learn from me, I'm learning from other people too. And it's regardless of age. If someone has a unique tip, it's like you said, check your ego at the door. Yeah. Just because I've been doing it a long time doesn't mean there's plenty for me to learn, and plenty from people. Sometimes we don't see the forest for the trees. Like you're looking at the bark and you can't see I'm in the woods. Yes. So sometimes I can also, whether it's from Mix magazine or online, obviously, or the forums or Reddit or whatever, someone might stumble across a new technique. I try to think outside the box and use tools that aren't necessarily geared specifically to just post audio. Sometimes music tools can be applied to solutions for post audio.
That's great. Well, talk a little about the tools. Let's get a little geeky, right? Like, what are some of your go-tos? Everybody's different, and I think like plugins these days, it's like you can overkill things. You can have like buy every single thing. But what are just some of the things you were like using these days that you're like, oh, this is I love this kind of stuff.
Some of the new tools have usurped the tools that we used previously. For a while, it was Isotope was kind of the flavor, and it's still very good for deticking and crackles and spectral repair. But I'm really loving Hush. Which is, Ian Sampson, who's this one guy. I've talked to him and I complimented him. It's really incredibly transparent and seamless. Like all of these tools, you want to use them judiciously and not make it sterile or antiseptic. Yes. But I think that's really a fantastic sounding plugin for that. The only thing is it's audio suite only. So if you want a real-time situation, maybe Supertone Clear, it offers much of the functionality with the simple controls, and you can run that on a channel or a chain. There are some other ones that I enjoy that are great, like DX Revive has some things that sometimes I've salvaged things that are distorted, or you can restore older recordings. There's all kinds of interesting things that you change your workflow, and sometimes I'll still use the true and tried Cedar DNS 1. And just for a little bit of the steam, like if you have, and I can, not as when I was younger, I could hear even higher frequencies, but you still hear the that steam, and the Cedar set to a specific mode is very good at lessening that or even eliminating that steam. So I kind of just use it for that, not for, I don't want to kill an ant with a bazooka. You'll kill the ant, but there'll be a whole lot of collateral damage.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I've heard a lot of the similar things and experiencing that. Today I was catching up with a engineering friend of mine, and we were talking a little bit. We'll just briefly touch on it, but we're talking briefly a little about AI and like what people think about it these days. I'm kind of the mindset that I think treating AI as a tool, and those who know how to prompt it, those who know how to master kind of it as an extension of their creativity, are the ones that are kind of at the forefront, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on some of that kind of stuff?
I concur. It's a tool. It's not perfect, and just as I vaunt these tools as being wonderful, Hush does the least amount of damage, but you can lean on all of them and they'll start getting a little bit of glitchy like that, and being able to differentiate intentional sounds that are part of the performance, little breaths, and then when someone goes, that's not a tick as a QC tick, that's part of a performance. I think the tools are powerful and they're good for discerning between noise and signal, like intended signal, but like any good thing, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that it's a little bit of hype. AI, and I'm not even just referring to the tools for post audio. I think just in the world, in general, these are tools that are powerful, that should be, definitely, I would say, well regarded, but not relied on solely. That's my take on it.
No, thank you for sharing that. Well, let's just talk career stuff for those who are maybe watching and they have a passion and a dream to do this. Like what kind of things would you say would be beneficial for those who, maybe have some background and really want to get in that chair? What are some things that you would recommend they focus on?
I would say that obviously the system that we're all using, the digital audio workstation, from the technical
Mhm.
standpoint, everybody should learn or master Pro Tools as best you can.
That's good.
So, and there's the barrier for entry is free. I mean, you can get Pro Tools
Yeah,
free,
free.
or
Yeah.
it's pretty nominal for a subscription
Mhm.
service on your computer or what have you that you may have. It doesn't have to be the latest, greatest, but learn Pro Tools, because that's everything is, whether you're editing, whether you're supervising, whether you're mixing, we're constantly
Right.
using it, editing it. That's the platform of choice.
Hmm.
So that's the technical aspect. As far as operationally, I would say, as I used that metaphor before, back the horse you want to ride. So if you want to mix feature films or do high-end streaming television, find a post-production audio facility or major studio that does the kind of things you want to do. So, for instance, if
Good.
you want to mix streaming television, find a facility that does that, and
Does
so that
that.
there's a
Yeah.
path for you
Mm.
to be, entry level position and not be afraid to do those entry level jobs, because I've
That's
seen
good.
this so many times nail and crush the entry level job, because someone will recognize, oh my gosh, they're getting lunches for us and everything is labeled, the names are on it, all the place settings are where they are, and we'll
Yes.
remember that. And I saw that on
Yes.
Saul season one.
Hmm.
Ariel Levine
Oh,
was
okay, cool.
wonderful at
Nice.
doing that, and now she's a story editor and
That's awesome.
writer on the show.
That's
It's
great.
it's just like nailing those aspects of it, and it's the same thing. You and I, we were in the tape vault, and work your
Yeah.
way up to a recordist, and you work your way up to mixer. There's
Yeah.
many paths, but I
Yeah.
would say definitely find a job, even if it's an internship, an
That's good.
unpaid internship. I know that's like not tenable necessarily unless you have a second job in this city, in this
Right, right,
economy.
right.
But if you're young, it can be very useful because it's like a
Mm.
free education. It's learning on the job, and
Mm.
usually you can ascend fairly quickly. It's not years. So
Oh, I love that. That's good. Pay attention, all right, friend, readers or listeners, pay attention to that. That's some good advice. Okay, now we'll kind of wrap things up like this, but if you could go back and talk to 20-year-old Larry, right? What
yeah,
would you tell him that now that you wish you knew back then?
I would say appreciate the journey more and not focus
Mm.
on the destination so much. So all those stops along the way
Yeah.
are, yes, they're stepping stones to get to where you want to get to, but enjoy them while you're in them,
Hmm.
because they're all part of that, 10,000 hours, the outliers that you're supposed to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
getting. It's all those
yeah, yeah,
experiences.
yeah.
It's very easy to forget to take it in and enjoy
Yeah.
it while you're going through it, because you're kind of mixing some crazy hours, and sometimes you
Yeah.
forget to stop and smell the roses. Every
Mm.
metaphor and trite cliche I can think of, but it is important. And I would tell my younger self to enjoy that journey, however long that takes, or whatever bumps
Yeah.
and bruises. You will learn from all of those things, even if
Mm.
it's failure, especially failure. If I
Yeah.
remember I had an early sweetening project, I just wasn't ready. This
Mm.
was a director that was a very high pressure director, and I came back and I wanted to prove him that I improved. This was very early on, and then I did another project with him, and he's like, "Yes, that's what I'm looking for." So
Mm.
take those early failures, or any time there's failures in career, whatever it is, and make it a learning moment,
Wow.
learning experience.
I love it. Larry, I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with me and us and giving us some insight. Valuable. I mean, this is like masterclass kind of style stuff. So I appreciate you sharing. And I think the one thing that, if I can look at your career as a whole, you know, at least from the outside looking in, you didn't get into this for the riches and fame, like to get famous. Like you genuinely care about this, and you've been persistent, and you've rode the ups and the downs, the hills and the valleys. You understand how to persevere and be persistent, and you always have struck me as such a very grateful person. And I think that is what makes you who you are in this industry, and why you are at the top of your game. And so thank you for taking time
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for your
to
kind words.
spend with us here at Mastering Post Production Sound. You could check out, Larry, what's coming up next? What's out there that people can check out that you're you're
Currently
working on?
mixing a project right now for ABC. It's called High Potential.
Oh, yes.
It's a
Yes.
fun show. We're doing a show for
Cool.
Netflix after that called Ransom Canyon. It's kind of Netflix's
Nice.
answer to Yellowstone.
Got it. All right.
And then after the new year, well, right before the new year, we're going to do Poker Face season 2.
Oh, season 2. That's right. Okay,
Yep,
great.
season 2 of that, and
Awesome.
then after the new year, we'll be doing early spring Jason Bateman's next show called Black Rabbit,
Look at
which was
that.
shot in New
I
York, and
love
then
it.
finally in the summer we'll be doing Vince Gilligan's show. That'll make its appearance.
Good.
So I got a few
Good.
things lined up coming
Good.
up.
Awesome. Well, go check out Larry's work. And if you were, I always recommend listening to people who, you want to emulate, people that are doing great things. So go check out Larry's work. Fantastic work. Work that has been recognized throughout the industry. So Larry, Benjamin, thank you
Thank you,
so
Joel.
much for
It's
your
a pleasure.
time. I appreciate
it. It's such a pleasure.
That's all we have for this episode of Mastering Post-Production Sound. Special shout out to Larry for joining us on this really awesome information-packed interview. Thank you very much, Larry, for that. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're so grateful you are here. Friend, if you're looking for someone to walk alongside you as you journey this industry, and it would be beneficial to spend one-on-one time with someone that knows the ups and downs of the industry. Right now, I'm accepting applications to work one-on-one exclusively with me. So if you're interested in that, taking your career to the next level, head on over to masteringpostproductionsound.com/coaching to apply to work one-on-one. Friend, thanks so much again. I'll see you over here in my 5.1 surround sound mixing video or in one of these other ones. Take care, friend. Until next week.